Wow. Donald Trump is a freaking nut. Let's talk about it. Donald Trump is a complete and utter lunatic. And beyond that, he is desperate. Desperate and quite pathetic. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Romano Report. I am Mark Romano. Today is Thursday, August 8th. And Donald Trump just wrapped up a press conference of sorts, and I'd like to thank him for that. He really has done America quite a service. You know, we are just trying to decide who to elect as president of the United States, and Donald Trump just held a press conference apparently to prove that he is mentally ill. And if that was his intent, well then congratulations, Donald. You made your point. And I thank you for doing that because the American people deserve to know that one of the two major party candidates is in fact mentally ill and completely divorced from reality. And that is exactly what he demonstrated. Now, the press conference just wrapped up, so I didn't have time to really put things together here, but I've got to get this done now or I'm not going to get it done today. So I ask you to bear with me a little bit. This might be a little bit disjointed. I took notes on the press conference here, and I'm just gonna talk about this. By the way, you can be watching or listening to this podcast. If you're listening to it, but would like to see the video of this, please go to the Romano Report on YouTube. I have two YouTube channels. One of them I'm going to be putting the audio version of this podcast on, but if you want to see the full video of it, go to the Romano Report and subscribe over there. You'll see the video of this and you'll see my handsome face. Okay, now on to this. Look, what this told me, and I already knew this going in, but Donald Trump is desperate. He is scared to death, and I tell you this often, but never forget it. This election is not about becoming president again for Donald Trump. That's not all it's about. What it's predominantly about for Donald Trump is staying out of prison. That is why he so desperately wants to win this election, because he knows that if he doesn't, he's probably going to end up in prison. That's how high the stakes are for him. And ever since Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris became the nominee, the excitement on the Democrat side has gone through the roof. She has taken off, not because of her, but what I'm about to say is not a dig on her in any way, but she is not the reason that her campaign has taken off. The reason her campaign has taken off is because Biden dropped out. And there was all this pent-up energy on the Democrat side to finally engage in this campaign because we want desperately to beat Donald Trump. And when Joe Biden dropped out and endorsed her and all of the party coalesced around her, everyone's energy was poured into her. That doesn't mean that people aren't legitimately excited about her, but I don't think that that's predominantly why her rise in the polls has been so meteoric. She didn't have to earn any of that excitement. It was there. It was ready to go. And as soon as she became the nominee and everybody, fell in behind her to support her, all of that pent-up enthusiasm, all the energy that we were waiting to pour into this campaign finally had an outlet. The Harris campaign, now the Harris-Walz campaign, and it has taken off. The enthusiasm really is off the charts, and it is reflected in the numbers. We have polls now. Every poll that comes out is better and better news for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and it's worse and worse for Donald Trump. There is a new poll out today. Let me pull this up. Poll conducted by Marquette Law School between July 24th and August 1st. So that is still a week behind. Shows that when third-party candidates are included, Harris leads among likely voters with 50% of the vote to Donald Trump's 42%. 8 points. 8 points. Now, I put out a tweet a few days ago. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Maybe not. I don't have it. No, do I have it? I don't have. I'm sorry. But this tweet I put up a few days ago, I predicted that Kamala Harris would be up by 8 to 10 points by the end of the Democratic convention. I did not think that it would be this quick. Now, this poll is an outlier. There's no other polls showing her up by 8. Okay, let's be honest about that. This is an outlier poll. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that the other polls aren't as favorable for Kamala Harris. But nonetheless, there is virtually no national poll, unless you go and look at Rasmussen, which is a complete and utter joke. But there is no other poll that has Donald Trump winning nationally. Donald Trump is only competitive now in the swing states, but of course that's where the election is won or lost. But even in all the swing state polls, the direction is all towards Kamala Harris, and she is leading in many of them. Anyways, you consider these polls, and then you look at this lunatic press conference that Donald Trump just gave, and it all makes sense. Okay, I've been telling you that this man is desperate. He is scared to death, and that press conference absolutely proved it. And he is even more scared and desperate than I even thought he was. The people on his campaign, his campaign managers, they must be going crazy over there to listen to this guy and an hour plus of rambling incoherence and outright insanity. They've got to be banging their heads against a wall. And I told you in yesterday's episode, please go back and watch it if you didn't. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But I told you that Donald Trump's best strategy for winning this election is to go the hell away, to spend all your time on the golf course and just run ads. Because the more that people see you and hear from you, the worse it is for you. All right? I said that yesterday. And that is largely what he has been doing. He has been out of the public eye because his people know this. Now, they're not going to tell him this directly because he won't believe it and he'll just fire them probably. But they know, La Savita and the rest of them, they know that the more Donald Trump is seen, the worse he does in the polls. And they have, I'm sure, have done everything they can to convince him to stay on the golf course and to not campaign, not to do things like he just did today. But I also told you that you can't keep these polls away from him. He's going to see the polls, and he's going to get scared to death, as he is. And in his demented mind, he believes the exact opposite is true. He believes that the more people see him and the more people hear from him, the better he's going to do in the polls and the better his chance will be to win. And so his instincts, upon seeing polls that all are moving in Kamala Harris's direction, his instinct, and especially the more desperate he gets, is going to be to do more events like this, to be seen more, to be heard more. And that's why he did this press conference. It was just announced, I think, this morning that he was going to do this. Nobody knew what the hell he wanted to talk about. Nobody knew what the format of this thing was going to be. Turns out it was just him at a podium rambling incoherently. And he wasn't reading off a teleprompter. Would have been much better. I'm sure La Savita and all of them wanted him to read prepared remarks off of a teleprompter. But no, he's not going to be contained. And from all the reporting that we have, he is pissed at his campaign staff because the fault is never with him, right? The fact that he is doing poorly in the polls cannot be a reflection on him. It's got to be everybody else's damn fault. And so he turns to the campaign staff he has around him and he blames them. And so whatever they're telling him to do, stay on the golf course, he's going to do the opposite. And if they're telling him to read prepared remarks from a teleprompter, he's going to do the opposite because he's smarter than them, he knows better than them, and so he goes out there and he rambles incoherently for an hour plus, and he demonstrates to the world that this is a very sick, demented, mentally ill human being who has no business anywhere near the Oval Office. That is what he just showed to not only America, but the world. This man is not fit to be president. Okay? And how anyone could watch that press conference and think that this man should be president, you have to be all in on the cult. That's it. Because unless you are a full-blown MAGA cultist who has long ago ceased thinking for yourself, unless you are one of those lunatics, you cannot possibly look at that press conference and think that this man is competent to be president. So that's where he began this press conference, out of pure desperation. So why don't we run through a few of the things that he said. Okay, so I just took notes here, scribbled some notes as he was talking, just some bullet points here. And the first thing, right out of the gate, is that he starts warning us what would happen, God forbid, if Kamala Harris became president. Well, he says we would end up in a depression, right? He said it wouldn't even be a recession. It would be way worse than that. It would be a depression. To which I would respond, you mean kind of like the depression we were in, essentially, when he was president and screwed up COVID so badly that we had the worst unemployment rate since the Great Depression? You mean kind of like that, Donald? He also said that if Kamala Harris was elected, that she would get us into World War III. Now, both of those things, as soon as he said those things, I was like, where have I heard this before? Oh yeah, I remember. This is the exact same thing, both of these things, that we'd end up in a depression, the stock market would crash, we'd be in World War III, on and on and on. I heard all of this stuff before, back in 2020, when he was running against Joe Biden. And then Joe Biden won. So now we have 4 years of a Biden presidency against which to measure his predictions from 4 years ago. And how do they stack up? Are we in a depression like he told us we would be? No. No, far from it. We're virtually at full employment, 4.3% unemployment rate. That is historically low unemployment. Okay, everybody who wants a job essentially in this country has a job. We're at economic full employment. Are we in World War III? No. In fact, if you want to talk about World War III, if you really want to see World War III happen, then vote for Donald Trump. Because that is the most likely way that we're going to end up in World War III. Because what would he do? Why do I say that? I'm not just saying it like Donald Trump does to scare people with no way to back it up. I'll tell you how we're going to end up in World War III, or God forbid, end up in World War III. We could end up in World War III. And that's if Donald Trump is reelected, what's he going to do with foreign policy? Well, he's told us what he's going to do. He's going to do Putin's bidding. He is going to pull America out of NATO, essentially giving Russia a green light to invade whatever NATO countries he wants to. And Donald Trump has already told us he won't do a damn thing about it. He said that he won't even come to help them. And that's what the NATO treaty is about. And he has said if Russia invades any of them, he's not going to do a damn thing to help them. Because then he talks about something, they're not paying their dues, which shows that the guy doesn't know anything about NATO. They don't pay dues. This is not a dues-paying organization. Guy's a freaking moron. As part of the NATO agreement, each member nation agrees to spend a certain amount of money on their own national defense, in their national defense budget. There's not dues that they're paying to NATO, and they're not paying, and so Donald Trump is going to punish them for not paying. That's not how it works, jackass. But that's what he's going to do. Of course, he knows that his supporters are too stupid to know that. They don't know anything about anything. So he can say a lie like that if he knows it's a lie, because he's pretty stupid. But if he knows it's a lie and he's lying to these people, he knows they're not going to know it's a lie. He knows he can say this kind of crap on Fox News and not a damn person watching that channel will know that they're being lied to. So if you want to end up in World War III, or you want to give us a good chance of ending up in World War III, then vote for Donald Trump, who will pull us out of NATO and encourage Putin to invade our allies. That's exactly what will happen. You want World War III? That's how you get World War III. Okay, so he starts off his idiotic press conference with making these dire predictions about what would happen if Kamala Harris is elected. The same exact dire predictions that he predicted 4 years ago with Joe Biden, none of which came to pass. So for that reason alone, why does anybody take this man seriously? And by the way, why does not one journalist in that press conference follow up with him? They know he made these same exact promises 4 years ago. They know they were bullshit. They know those things didn't come to pass. And not a single follow-up question. Hey, Mr. Former President. Hey, convicted felon Donald Trump. You made these same promises 4 years ago and they didn't come to pass. Why should anyone believe that they will come to pass if Kamala Harris becomes president? No, not a single question like that. Okay, then, after he made those dire predictions, he goes right into whining about Joe Biden dropping out. Said it before, I'm going to say it again. And I think I'm going to say it again because I deserve to say it again for the crap that I endured in the lead up to Joe Biden dropping out of the race. The crap, the attacks that were leveled against me for suggesting Biden should drop out. So I deserve to point this out. But I told you before Biden dropped out that nobody wanted Joe Biden to stay in the race more than Donald Trump. And boy, if he doesn't prove that that's true every time he opens his mouth or posts on Truth Social. Donald Trump was whining at this press conference incessantly about Joe Biden dropping out of the race. This is one of the things he spent probably the most time on. He's very, very upset that Joe Biden dropped out. He was desperate to run against Joe Biden because all he was going to do is run on the age thing. And it was working for him. And that age thing alone was probably going to get him reelected. But that's what they had geared their whole campaign for. He didn't have to talk about issues, nothing. He didn't have to defend his record. He didn't have to defend, his criminality. All he had to do was talk about Joe Biden's age. The press was going right along with that whole narrative. That's all he had to do. And he thought he was going to ride that right into the White House. And he was on track to do exactly that. Then Joe Biden drops out. Kamala Harris becomes the presumptive nominee and now the official nominee. And he is losing his damn mind. The Democratic Party has coalesced around Kamala Harris. She's going up in the polls, and he is melting the freak down. He can't handle it. He doesn't know how to respond to it. He doesn't know how to campaign against this, and he's losing it. And he went on and on about Joe Biden having the election stolen from him. We talked about this on yesterday's episode. He's all of a sudden he's very upset about the treatment that Joe Biden suffered at the hands of the Democrats. He says that the Democrats stole the presidency from him, which literally makes no sense since Joe Biden is still president. But they stole the presidency from him. They stole the nomination from him. He's very, very upset about that. He's very upset at Joe Biden being so mistreated. This is the same man who wants to put Joe Biden in prison. Right, but he's worried about the treatment that Joe Biden has suffered. But he went on and on and on about this, and then whining about Kamala Harris getting the nomination without anybody voting. So he just went on and on. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, and about Kamala Harris, while he's whining about all of that, he's telling us how horrible she is. He said she's incompetent and that she's stupid. And that she's the worst vice president in the history of the country. And she is the least popular vice president in the history of the country. And whining and whining, and he's so upset about it. And I'm thinking, if she's the least popular vice president in history, if she's the worst vice president in history, then what are you complaining about? Shouldn't you be happy that you're running against her? Man, if I was running for president and my opponent was the worst vice president in history and the least popular vice president in history, I'd be pretty damn happy about that. I should be able to just cruise to re-election. Everybody already hates my opponent, right? Yeah, wishful thinking, Donald. If any of that were true, she wouldn't have skyrocketed to the lead in all these national polls. And there's not a single poll, by the way, in all of this stuff. And you can get polls to show pretty much anything. And if you take Rasmussen, that joke of a poll, out of the equation, there's not a single poll that shows Donald Trump gaining. Not a single one. Every single poll shows the same exact trajectory of this race. This race, day by day, is moving more and more towards Kamala Harris and away from Donald Trump. Now, will this be sustained? I don't know. And I will caution everyone. I think she's going to win. She's certainly on track to win. But I will caution everyone, it's still 90 days out, 3 months. In the way that our politics are, that is an eternity. Anything could happen. But I really do believe it would take some kind of event to change the trajectory of this race. It would take some sort of externality to come into the equation to upend this race. You know, some sort of economic crisis, some sort of foreign policy disaster that somehow would benefit Trump in the race. And these things happening wouldn't necessarily benefit Trump, but they could, I guess, arguably, depending upon what happens, or any number of other things could happen that we can't foresee right now. But outside some sort of event changing the trajectory of this race, I don't think it's going to. Because for the same reason that Kamala Harris vaulted in the polls to the position that she currently is in, that reason has to do with the American people, a majority of them, not wanting this orange criminal to ever step foot in the White House again. That's what this is about. And when she became the nominee, when Biden dropped out and we had a place to channel, like a serious place, the Biden campaign wasn't even really campaigning. They certainly weren't taking the case against Trump to Trump. They weren't even making the case against Donald Trump. And once Kamala Harris became the nominee and we had a place to channel all our energy, all the people who don't want to see Donald Trump ever be president again, we had a place to channel our energy. And that's why she's in the position she is right now. And that's not going to change. These people aren't going to suddenly support this piece of shit, right? So, and on top of that, look at the candidates. What can Donald Trump do? What can he do? Everybody knows this guy, all right? What can he do to change people's perception of him? And what can he do toe-to-toe against Kamala Harris? He's a blithering idiot. He is a dementia-ridden, mentally ill psychopath with God only knows how many personality disorders, right? He's old, he's out of shape, he's stupid, you know, he's incoherent. What's he going to do? How's he going to campaign? The more he is seen and heard from, as we've discussed, the worse it is for him. And now, by the way, he talked about debates in this press conference also. And this is extremely telling. It wasn't that long ago that he backed out of the pre-scheduled debate to which he had already agreed. And the reason he gave was that he's leading in the polls. I'm leading in the polls. There's no reason. I wish I could do a Trump impersonation. I can't do any impersonations. It would come in quite handy if I was able to do a Trump impersonation. But, oh well, not one of my talents. So he says he was leading in the polls, and that's the reason he wasn't going to debate, because he didn't have to. Why should I? I'm already winning in the polls by so much. No reason for me to debate. The same bullshit excuse he gave in the primaries for not debating fellow Republicans. So that was his excuse. He's not going to debate because he's leading in the polls. Now, all of a sudden, in this incoherent, rambling, lunatic press conference, he says he wants 3 debates. So what are we to deduce from that? If the reason he wasn't going to debate is because he was winning in the polls, now that he wants debates, what should we conclude from that? Well, exactly what the polls show. He's now losing, and he's desperate, and he needs to do something, anything. Now he says he wants to debate. How do you think that's going to go for him? Take a look at this friggin' press conference. This is what this guy is like when he's unscripted and he's not reading from a teleprompter. This is what he sounds like. Picture that against Kamala Harris on a debate stage. I don't think that's going to go too well for him. But again, he cannot be in any way objective when it comes to himself. His mental illness precludes that. He is a narcissist. He can never accept the idea that someone might be better than him at something, that he is not up to the task. He thinks he is the best at everything. And he thinks that if he gets on a debate stage, he will destroy Kamala Harris. But his people know that that ain't so. And they've tried to keep him off the debate stage against her. But, I'm sure they didn't want him to do this press conference. He did it. I'm sure they don't want him to debate. Looks like he's, open to doing that now. And why? Out of sheer desperation. If he was winning, then he wouldn't be calling for debates. He'd continue to golf. He'd continue to go with his campaign manager's plan, which is a smart plan, which is to keep Donald Trump away from the cameras, keep him off TV, keep his mouth shut, just have a cadre of people kissing his ass on the golf course, keep him on the golf course, let us run ads, and that's our best chance. That doesn't mean they would win, but that is their best chance to win. Doesn't seem like he's going to take their advice anymore now that he appears to be losing, or at the very least, is sinking in the polls. Of course, lying about the polls is something else that he did a lot. He said that he's leading in the polls by a large margin. Of course, he always says that. Okay, what else do I have here? Biden mistreated. Oh, he got a question about the size of the crowds at Kamala Harris's rallies. And you could tell as soon as he heard that question, man, did he get upset. And he went on and on and on about how big his crowds are and how small her crowds are. He said he gets crowds 20 and 30 times as big as Kamala Harris's crowds. He said that she can only draw like 1,000 people and he's getting 80,000. And he went so far as, this is truly unbelievable, but again, the guy's a blithering idiot. He was bragging about the size of his crowd on January 6th. I am sure his campaign staff were pulling their hair out hearing that. The last thing, if your candidate is the guy who engineered an insurrection, the last thing you want your candidate to talk about is the insurrection they engineered. And this moron brags about the size of the crowd he brought to his insurrection. This guy, and in doing so, he compared the size of the crowd at his insurrection to the size of the crowds that Martin Luther King Jr. drew on the mall. Of course, he is delusional. We've all seen that great I Have a Dream speech at the Lincoln Memorial. And we saw the size of those crowds. And anyways, the guy is a freaking nut. So once again, Donald, thank you so much for proving that to the American people. Okay, what else? Oh, here's another one. Another one, this guy. Imagine having him as the candidate and you're a campaign manager. My Lord. Which is good news because he obviously does not listen to his campaign team at all, and he's not going to. I think he was there for a little while. Clearly, he no longer is. He was bragging about overturning Roe versus Wade. Yeah, bragging about overturning Roe versus Wade. The issue that probably did more to help Democrats in the 2022 midterms than any other issue, and he's bragging about being the guy who caused it. And of course, he repeats his oft-repeated lie that everybody, including Democrats and whatever list, progressives, and everybody wanted Roe versus Wade overturned so that they could send it back to the states. Everybody agreed. Yes, keep bragging about that, Donald. Go ahead, please. I'm sure La Savita and the rest of them are just applauding along with you taking full credit for having overturned Roe versus Wade. There were so many instances in this press conference, things like that, that the Harris campaign could take clips of and turn into ads. All they got to do is play clips of Donald Trump from that press conference and then put at the end, this ad was paid for by the Harris for President campaign. That's all you got to do. Just cut it up and get it on the air, because not enough people would have seen it. So bragging about that. Oh, and here's another one. This lie that he told, it's one of those lies where you listen to it and you think to yourself, his supporters can't really be this stupid, can they? And then you find clips of his supporters saying exactly this. And that's when you go, my God, these people really are that stupid. Donald Trump was, in the part where he was bragging about having overturned Roe versus Wade, he was telling, he was saying everybody wanted it sent back to the states, but some of the states are really, really liberal, and some of the states, Democrats, controlled by Democrats, they want abortion legal even after the baby is born. Number one, that's by definition not an abortion, moron. But on top of that, what he was saying is, and he literally said it, and he specifically cited the former governor of Virginia and Democrats accusing them of wanting to kill the baby after the baby was born, and making it legal for the mother and a doctor to decide, you know what, we don't want this baby, let's kill it. It's been born, but that's okay, we're going to kill it anyway. And he says that that's legal in certain states. I've heard him say it before that it's legal in California. Obviously, it's not legal anywhere. That's murder, and it is illegal everywhere. You hear that, and you really, you scratch your head. Are his supporters really this stupid? And yes, they really are that stupid. I don't know how many video clips I've seen where his supporters at his rallies are asked about this, and they repeat this. They agree with it. Oh, I just saw one the other day where there's a group of people saying that Democrats want to kill babies after they're born, and that's already legal in California. Yes, these people really are that stupid. And how is it that they can be that stupid? The reason they are that stupid, on top of the fact that many of them are just stupid to begin with, but they feed on a constant diet of Fox News and places like Fox News. They immerse themselves in this crap 24/7 to the point that they believe it. And anything that's said on these platforms, Fox News and the ridiculous podcasts they listen to and all of that, Steve Bannon, they believe every word. All right, so let me see what else here. Okay, debates. I covered one final thing. This brought a smile to my face. When Donald Trump was running in 2016, you remember the chants about Hillary Clinton, lock her up, and he was promising that he would prosecute Hillary Clinton if he's president. In fact, during one of their debates, he said that if he was president, she would be in jail. Right? Remember that? Well, obviously that didn't happen. He won. Hillary Clinton was never prosecuted. And people in his cult are very upset that she was never prosecuted. Of course, they don't blame him, but they cite the fact that Hillary was never charged with a crime as evidence that the deep state is rigged against Republicans, because Donald Trump was prosecuted and Hillary Clinton never was. So it's the deep state and everything's rigged against Republicans and all that. Well, somehow they got on to the question of, they asked him about prosecuting his enemies if he wins, because he promised to do that. And he went into a bit about Hillary Clinton. And he said, you remember, in my rallies, they used to say, lock her up. And I never approved of that. And I always tried to tamp that down. And then he said, when he became president, he made sure that she was not prosecuted, that he was protecting her, because it would be terrible to prosecute the wife of a former president. So he was protecting her. He actually frigging said this. He admitted it. So if you see any of those clips anywhere on social media, clip of him talking about how the only reason Hillary Clinton wasn't prosecuted was because he protected her, make sure you send that clip to all of the MAGA cultists who you might know, because I'm sure they would be interested in seeing that. Okay, now I will wrap it up. I got to get going, but I will leave you with this. I saw a tweet by George Conway this morning. By the way, have you seen these ads? You know, George Conway has this new political action committee called Psycho PAC. It's absolutely terrific. And his goal is to make sure the American people know about Donald Trump's mental illness and his personality disorders, because the media is not covering it, and they should cover it. And so he has set up this PAC to bring that information to the American people, and it's fantastic. So check it out if you haven't done so, and you can even contribute to talk about a worthy cause. Anyway, he posted a tweet this morning, and he said, "Something to keep in mind. The depression we saw Donald Trump exhibit during the 64 days between November 3rd, 2020 and January 6th, 2021 was nothing compared to what we could see from him in the 88 days that remain before the 2024 election." Now, that is absolutely true. And this press conference is evidence of it. This man is melting down. He is spending his time at Mar-a-Lago freaking the hell out. Never forget what I keep telling you. He's afraid of going to prison. This is not just about an election. You know, we who are wrapped up in the election and want to see him lose this election so he never becomes president again, we need to keep in mind that for Donald Trump, it's not just about winning an election. It's about winning elections so he stays out of prison. And when he sees himself losing in the polls, I'm telling you, that's immediately where his mind goes. He's scared to death of ending up in prison. And so as he continues to flounder in this campaign, and as we get closer to the election, and, you know, he was asked about this also in the press conference about her bounce in the polls. And he said, "Oh, well, this is just a honeymoon period. It'll go away." And they asked, "Well, what if it doesn't go away?" "Oh, it'll go away. It'll go away." Well, I don't think it will, because this is not about a honeymoon period. It's about what I described earlier. And so it's not going to go away. And so as she continues to do well in the polls against him, and as the time between now and the election dwindles, meaning he has less time to turn it around, and it looks more and more like she might actually win, he is going to become more and more deranged. He is going to lose it more and more, and he will become more and more dangerous, right? God only knows what he will call upon his supporters to do. So we should take that threat very, very seriously, but keep this in mind too. You know, and what ties in with this is a comment that President Biden made yesterday in an interview, where he said he is not at all confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power if Donald Trump loses. And none of us should be. But if you want to minimize the risk of violence happening, if you want to minimize the risk of Donald Trump being able to effectively do something, then we need to beat him by as much as possible. Because if we beat him big, if he loses big, his options are very, very limited. You know, his attempt to try to steal the election last time, he was only able to get anywhere with that. And legally, he didn't get anywhere. But he was able to rile the people up because he was able to effectively convince them that the election had been stolen because it was close. And I know people on our side, some people like to say, well, the election wasn't close. He got 306 electoral votes. The total in the electoral count belies the closeness of the race. It was a very, very close race. Now, it wasn't close on the popular vote. I think he won the popular vote nationally by something like, Biden won the popular vote nationally by something like 7 million votes or something. So nationally, it wasn't close, but that's not how we do our elections, as we know. In the handful of swing states that made the difference, it was very, very close. It was something like 70,000 votes spread out among 3 different states, that if those 70,000 votes had gone the other way, Donald Trump would have won. So it was a very, very close election. And that's the only reason he was really able to get the traction on this stolen election thing that he was able to. Now, it's going to be harder this next time around because, you know, the crying wolf thing is going to come into play. I mean, if he loses and he says the election was stolen this time, you know, you just said that last time. Now you're saying it again. And by the way, about that, why his people never think of this is beyond me. Donald Trump, he knew he was going to lose the election last time, or he knew there was a very good chance that he was going to. The polls were saying he was going to lose the election. And so even before the election, he was laying the groundwork to make his stolen election claim, right? You remember that. He was saying they're rigging the election, it's going to be stolen, because he knew he was going to claim that the election was stolen when he lost. So he was laying the groundwork. And then he loses and he claims the election is stolen. Now, if Donald Trump, here's a question for his idiot cultists. Man, my allergies are killing me here. If Donald Trump knew before the election that the election was going to be stolen, then why didn't he do anything about it? I mean, he was president. If anyone in the country has the power to prevent an election being stolen, then you would think it would be the President of the United States with the full power of the executive branch of the federal government at his disposal. If he knew that they were rigging the election, they were going to steal it, then why didn't he stop them? And if he, going with the Trump cult logic here, they believe the election was stolen. He was telling them in advance that they were going to steal it. Doesn't this mean that he is thoroughly incompetent? I mean, if you know the election is going to be stolen and you have all this power and you're unable to prevent an election from being stolen from you, then you are an incompetent fool of the highest order, are you not? And who stole the election? A guy who had no power, right? Biden had no power to do anything. He was, as they like to say, hiding out in his basement. This was in the middle of COVID. He wasn't even out campaigning, right? They said he was hiding in his basement. So a guy who had no power, held no elective office, who's hiding in his basement, he stole the election? And you knew about it in advance, right? So if you knew about it, how come you couldn't stop him? And if you're telling us now that they're going to rig it again and then you lose, the whole thing is just stupid. The point is, how do these guys not reach the conclusion that either he's completely full of shit or he's the most incompetent president in American history, the only person stupid enough to both be president and to have someone who's out of power steal the election from you when you knew it was going to happen? You're a complete idiot, and they never reached that conclusion. Anyway, all right, I think I should probably wrap this up here. But again, if you're listening to this and you want to watch the video, go to the Romano Report channel on YouTube. Please like this video if you haven't done so already. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And please recommend this channel to your friends and family. That'll do it. Thank you so much for watching. Be well, and I'll talk to you again soon.